Okay, folks, welcome to the UK rental market update. This is the report for ZOOPLA, and this is up to March 2023. It's quite revealing, Richard. This is quite a. I tell you what, I was looking at the summary in total, and I was thinking the proverbial is possibly going to hit the fan if it's not hit the fan already.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. I was looking through it earlier as well, and I think on everybody's got the question about what is actually happening in the rental market. It's ever changing. I think day on day things change, and everybody's a wee bit in doubt about how things are actually sitting at the present time. So it's good to cover this.
Extremely worrying. I mean, the executive summary here, for the people on TikTok and Instagram, apologies, you won't be able to see what we're showing in terms of graphs, but we'll try and explain it as we go as well. And if you do want to see the graphs and stuff like that, pop over to Fife Properties TV. We're running live on there just now on YouTube. You can see it on there as well, and you can make your comments as well. We will take questions. We will answer questions as well towards the end. But it's, and I've looked at some of my other stuff as well, because we're going to talk about the costs of what it costs to rent as well, and how much it's gone up in terms of finance in the last 6 months for the average landlord in comparison in Scotland, for example, to the minimum rent increases you're allowed to do from the 1st of April, which is between 3 and 6%, and how that equates to what you can actually do. I tell you what, for landlords out there, you better buckle down the hatches. There's the tide is coming. I would say the tidal wave. Anyway, let's talk about the executive summary. You can see there in the key headlines there, Richard, 11.1% annual rent inflation for new lets. That is. Now that's new lets. Now we've got to have an important distinction here. There's a lot of properties that actually have been tenancies for maybe 5 or 6 years, and none of the landlords have actually put up their rents within that period of time. Therefore, we're trying to do freezes on rents, and we're trying to say you can't put the rent up. But the thing is, the landlord's not put the rent up for 6 years.
Yeah, that's a bit of a misconception, I think.
Saying you're going to stop you putting them up.
Yeah, because in between tenancies, I mean, and the start of new tenancies and things, then obviously that's the point where people are reviewing their rental values, maybe adjusting them accordingly, or if they're a new property in the market and it's a new investor and things that's brought on, then they're going to price it accordingly. But all these existing tenancies and tenants that have been in properties for, like you say, 5, 6+ years, some of them haven't changed.
Yeah, myself included.
Yes.
I've never really actually increased any rents when a tenant's been in situ since the very beginning over the last 30 years. When I have, you could count on one hand how many times I've actually done that. And it's only because I've agreed to things like new double glazing, new heating system, new kitchen. And that was just one property in itself. And all I did was put the rent up 50 quid a month. for that, which was very minimal, to the very fact that I spent probably the best part of £16,000 to do it.
Yeah.
So not an effective, really good use of my rent return, but for me personally, I felt it was essential. But the government tying their hands is causing a real problem, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it's important to remember that each landlord and their portfolio and things is different for each, and it's an individual basis. So what's right for one person might not be right for the next.
You could see the rhetoric as well in the media just now in terms of the English market, and how there's. I just saw a story there now how it was. A tenant complained to their landlord about the fact that the heating wasn't working effectively, and they got the notice to leave. And they're arguing that it's, if you complain in England as a tenant to your landlord, you're twice as more likely to be evicted under no fault eviction. So this is the rhetoric in order to try and get rid of the Section 21 in England, which they got rid of, in Scotland anyway. We don't have no fault eviction anymore. Therefore, it really curtailed it for us, and I'll explain why. In terms of me. It then came to a point where you had a definitely antisocial tenant, but you weren't in a position where you could actually explain to them that they were antisocial in case anything happened, like assault or anything like that. So you felt that the easy course of action was just to do the no fault eviction to get rid of them, because no one wants to get rid of a tenant, pays the rent, actually looks after everything, and also and doesn't damage the property and is not antisocial. Nobody wants to get rid of a tenant like that, do they?
No, that's the kind of tenant you want to keep, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So no fault eviction makes it extremely difficult now to take any tenant at all, and vetting has got even more stringent than usual for that reason. Okay, let's go back to this. So it goes on about 51%, and we'll talk about these headlines here in this graph. Let's just talk about the executive summary then. So according to ZOOPLA, the rental inflation has slowed to 11.1% from a high of 12.3% in mid-2022. Can I just say out there, why is the government then not? I mean, food inflation sitting at 17.8%, rental inflation sitting at 11.1%. And yet we've got legislation stopping us from increasing our rents, but none of the supermarkets have any legislation saying that they can't increase food prices.
Yeah, there's no restrictions there. There's nothing implemented to kind of put a cap on food prices and things. Like you say, inflation's away up at like 17 point, what did you say? Or 17%.
17.8 food inflation.
Yeah.
It's running it right now. And then when you look at it as well, you look at the banks, you know, base rates have gone up to 4.25%. We're going to talk about the comparables in a minute. Yeah. But then there's no cap on the amount the banks can actually charge. You know, why is that?
Yeah, what's good for one should be good for another.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of industries and things, yeah.
There's not a consistent, coherent policy in this, and the fact that landlords are now in the position where they're having to weather the storm of the increase in maintenance costs, the increase in property management costs, and also the increase in finance costs.
Yeah, there's a lot of landlords who are feeling that, and I think
let's talk about that right now, Richard. Actually,
yeah.
So, here's some examples. In 6 months ago, because it's over the last 6 months, you rent to monitor this. So 6 months ago, my interest. Now I've not changed these amounts. I've not done anything other than taking it from 6 months ago to where it is now. Now it's not even taken into account the next base rate rise, which was 0.25%, which will add on to here as well. So it will be higher. So the difference in some of my financing in the last 6 months.
So that's your own portfolio.
Yeah, own portfolio, own properties. So here's one. The rent is £350 a month. The difference in finance in the last 6 months is £51 has gone up every month. So I now have to pay another £600 a year on this property for finance. But my rent has never gone up at all. Yeah. So so it's gone up £51 in a month. So that's what it is now from the 6 months ago. But under the legislation for Scotland, if I was to increase it by 3%, I'd be able to recover £10.50 a month. So I'd be still worse off by about £40. And at the 6%, if I can't justify it just on that alone, I can only recover £21 a month at the very most. So I'm still £30 out every single month in terms of my, and I can't increase my rents to accommodate for that. I just has to take an absorption of £30. Plus, I then have to take an absorption of the maintenance costs as well. Because remember, it's the lower of the 6% or the additional costs that you've got. But the additional costs for me in that terms in this property itself, it was round about, I would say, 60, 70, probably about £70, £70 or £80. So that's £80, and the only amount I can recover at the very maximum if I apply for it 3 months down the line is £21.
£21, yeah.
At that point. That's a similar story for the next property, a similar story for the next property, a similar story for the next property, a similar one for the next property, and we've got another one here, which is £64 an increase every time. Now the rent on this is £495, but I can only recover just under £30 on a 6% increase. If it was a 3%, it would be £15. So I'm having to take that as well as all the additional costs on top of that, finance cost. I've got one here as well, actually, which is quite interesting. The mortgage has gone up £134 each month. Yes, since the last 6 months. Yep. This is a free floating one. This is how variable rates change. It's gone up £134 a month. It's gone up in terms of the mortgage financing, but I can only recover at the very maximum at 6%, £33. So I'm at £100 a month on that property. £100 a month is literally what a landlord potentially makes on profit.
Yeah, some landlords, that is the profit. Yeah.
The shit is going to hit the fan.
Do you know, Jim?
I couldn't say it any other way. It really is going to hit the fan when you look at that. Now, for me, I'm quite fortunate because I've never overgeared myself, so I can absorb. But you can't, for the other landlords out there were new entrants into the market, who have actually mortgaged up to the hilt to actually get the property in the first place, It really is. And now I had reckoned there was going to be 356,000 tenancies by the end of this year because of extra additional finance costs in jeopardy.
Yeah.
That's about 36,000 in Scotland. Now, when you work out there's 250,000 houses needed every single year in England, and there's 25,000 in Scotland to build every single year, if all these properties disappear because of the finance costs, because they'll have to sell them or they'll be repossessed, then where does that leave the allocation of new build houses required to deal with the existing population that we've got now in terms of its growing? It's quite worrying.
It doesn't leave us in a good position at all. And what you've just demonstrated there, Jim, is something that I'm hearing more and more. And I think there's a lot of other landlords that are in that position, the exact same position. Their costs now, due to mortgage rises and things, is far outweighing what even the 3 or the 6% could even help them out with. I'd be interested to hear.
Here's another one actually. So here it's going up £131 a month as well in the last 6 months.
Be interesting to hear for people watching, if you want to jump in, if people are experiencing something similar, which I imagine a lot of you will be, please jump in the comments and let us know, just so we could get an idea of what is happening, obviously, out with the people that we deal with, and obviously yourself, John.
What prompted me to look at these numbers this morning was because the Scottish Association of Landlords has sent out to its members a survey to that effect. Yeah. And while I didn't really bother about it, I started to focus on it because of this survey, because I thought I better put something in. And then I worked out what my average rent was. My average rent is 484, over my stock, times 0.03. So literally I can only increase every month by 484, which is £15 a month I can recover on a 3% increase.
Yeah.
6% will be £30. So if you've just been told there, £30 at the very, very most, and then here in this example, mortgage rates for me and the finance cost in the last 6 months has gone up at least on average 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's just tally that up and divide it by 9. 51. £71 on average. So £71 on average, these mortgages have gone up in the last 6 months, and I will only be able to recover at the very most, £29. And that's not taking into account the additional management fees, because management fees are having to go up as well, because everybody's got the inflationary aspect on it. Then you've got your maintenance fees, which contractors are going up as well, aren't they?
Yeah, that's got a knock-on effect right across the board, I think, and you'll see that obviously everybody's aware of things increasing. But yeah, contractor fees, because their time obviously is more valuable, their obviously resources and materials and things have gone up. So, I mean, it just has a knock-on effect.
And then you also have the effect of the insurance costs as well. Will have to go up as well. Yeah. So insurance is still to go on top of that. You've got factors. If you've got a factor,
if you're in a building, you've got factoring fees,
property factor fee, which will have to go up as well. So I can't see how most landlords are going to be able to survive that have just entered this market if they're on that. And I can't see, the ones that have come in with no money down and they've been ambitiously giving away 8% and 10% to investors. If you're an investor to one of these people right now, you better think about twice about what you're doing right now. Because that has serious implications on the fact that they've got to finance your 10% or your 8% return or your 5%, depending on what you've got in security. But then they've not got much leeway between, because they've mortgaged everything to the bank, more than likely. So
these are the people that these are the people that really need to think about things in the first instance before they jump in feet first. I know obviously you're always on for saying Monte Carlo or bust, but in this kind of economy and things, I mean, there's a lot, and it's a shame because there's a lot of enthusiastic people out there who are really keen to get started building a portfolio and provide housing, and do you know what I mean? And that's the people that we want in the sector and building things up. But unfortunately, some of them are going to fall foul to the current situation.
What do you think the first thing it's going to suffer? It's going to be maintenance, isn't it?
Yeah, and then that means the deterioration in the standard of property, and then ultimately who suffers? The tenant.
Yeah. So in a roundabout way, there's a strong correlation between the government's legislation and slum landlords getting created. That's effectively what's going to happen. The government's legislation is going to lead to more slum landlords.
Rather than improving property standards or
And
helping
these
to
landlords are the landlords that genuinely want to improve their stock, but
Yep.
they don't have the necessary resources anymore because they won't be able to increase their rents, and especially in Scotland, to be able to accommodate for that, to be able to improve their stock as a result. So, you know, if you're a tenant out there, I'm afraid your future is you're going to have to look after your kitchen a lot more, because it's going to be there for a lot longer. Same with things like heating systems. So it's only really going to come down at this point in time to essential repairs. It have to be done. It's not going to be I need to, you know, we've got this recently where I've decanted a house and I'm putting in windows, I'm putting in a kitchen, I'm putting in a heating system, and I'm also putting in a bathroom as well. So I'm doing all that. It's going to cost me the best part of just shy of £20,000 to do it. But if I'd known this before I started the journey, now we are doing it anyway, I probably wouldn't have done it.
To that extent, probably not. No.
I would have definitely thought. I would have thought twice. I would have thought twice about doing it, because it's £20,000. It might be necessary in order for.
We might even land on the other side of 20. Do you know what I mean? Time the windows and things as well. So we're not quite.
Well, it is actually. Now you say that, because I know what I paid for the windows, because they're all done and dusted in it.
Yeah. So we've got.
And a lot of people are out there, you know, there will be people out there that say, you know, you've got to reinvest for your stock and all the rest of it. But if you've got no money to reinvest and you've really got no rent coming in, it's going to be able to cover these costs. Therefore, you're going to be in a difficult position. So it really is a case of battening down the hatches.
And that's where we come back to profit and how landlords, I mean, people castigate landlords for making a profit.
You can't say profit.
You need to make a profit in order to reinvest. I know.
But landlord profit? You're having a laugh. Are you? Really? It's like, of course you have to make a profit. As a trained accountant, and, you know, as a trained accountant in industry previously, you know, you have to make a profit to reinvest in the business, to reinvest in your stock. If you don't make a profit, you can't put anything back in. Therefore, you can't improve your stock. You know, this is a classic example when you look back to the 1980s, and I will cite the Thatcher years, where the stock had been run down so much by local authorities because they'd never really put anything back in to actually improve all their stock, that they took the decision to sell off most of the council houses as the way forward, because there was a huge ticking time bomb of a maintenance bill over these houses. And in order to bring them up to current standard. So that's why a lot of this stock got transferred to housing associations, and a lot of them got sold off as well on the right to buy. However, you reap what you sow. The councils just never thought about the fact that we need to replace this at some point in time. And you could have this argument, and I will have, you know, I'll say this right now. The first thing someone will say is, but the councils weren't allowed to do this. They weren't allowed to reinvest in stock and reinvest in houses. Well, you know, there was money available through the Scottish Homes and other organisations outside of the council, which were actually able to invest in housing stock, and they have been doing for several years over the last 30 years. And I know that because I visited Scottish Homes at one point in time to look about doing build to rent. And build to rent had actually just disappeared when I first started, which was about 25, 30 years ago. Build to rent had disappeared for private landlords, and they actually decided to allocate the money to housing associations. So housing associations have been doing this for years, and they had the golden opportunity to do it, but the governments hadn't pushed them enough to actually to grow big enough and to grow fast enough in order to accommodate for this. So it is a ticking time bomb, and it's now arrived, and kicking the can down the road with the legislation to do with rent freeze and moratoriums and evictions isn't going to solve this problem.
It is quite, like, I mean, it is kicking the can down the road, really. I mean, it's here. We know what the issue is, so rather than delay, let's just look at the best options to deal with it. Well, the government should.
I did hear, you know, people have actually been coming onto TikTok and places like that and sitting saying, you know, oh, Section 30 of the, I don't know what it is, the European Union Act or something like that, goes on about how the governments are going to be, you know, in the future, their commitments, socialist governments, are to take all the stock of private landlords and own them themselves. I'm afraid that's not entirely possible. They can't do that because they've got no money to do it. Plus the fact they've got the legislation in place doesn't allow them to do that at all. And they will not be able to change the legislation in order to do that. It's been tried years and years ago, and it's failed. It will never happen. Simply for the fact that most of the people in power, quite a lot of the people in power are
landlords
themselves.
Yeah, I know.
And the last thing they're going to do is let that happen. So, and they're the people act in the legislation and put it in place. Anyway, that gets off the beaten track. I thought I'd cover that first so people would understand where we are right now in terms of that. I'll be interested. I'm going to see if there's any quick couple of comments and stuff like that in terms of what I was saying. Yeah, good day, Barry. Still figuring, Barry, if you're still figuring out how to put up the 6% and in your contract, you better hurry up then, because you'll need it, especially after what I've just said. I've not put my rent up in 6 years. That is 100% true. I'm a good landlord. Just, yeah, okay.
Got a couple of questions here, Jim.
Yes, I get that. I'll get them in a minute. I'm just wading through. Thank God I own my own properties outright, but I was thinking of getting more with mortgages. So good to know. Well, you've got to do your numbers, I would say, definitely, for that. A 0.5% increase costs for me is £250 per extra per calendar month. Wow. Cheesy peeps. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I had 2 tenants leave recently, so the increases in rent will help. Yeah, I mean, that is one of the. I've got to say, Richard, it does encourage landlords out there to then say, maybe we should have hopefully my tenant will move so I can actually get a new tenant and get a higher increase.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what kind of that'll push people to make that, to try and obviously get the tenant to move, so then they could obviously change that.
This is the other one where it goes back to actually Inspire for Success actually says, so making a loss is okay. Well, according to the government it is, or the Scottish government, the Green Party especially. What do you think about the new 2-week evictions in England? Yeah, okay, 2-week evictions in England. This is for, in certain circumstances, like, antisocial behaviour and stuff like that. Yes, you might be able to do it, but the biggest challenge to that is there'll probably more than likely be discretionary grounds. And that then relies on you providing belts and braces evidence for that 2-week eviction to apply, and then actually go to court and then prove to the court that you are justified in actually being able to do that based on the evidence that you've submitted to them. The chances of the court evicting them are
slim to none. Yeah,
very, very slim to none. We'll put it like that. I don't want to say definitely not, but I can't see that. It might happen, but I can't see it. I can't see it working out for that. Let's look at social media here. Davy Muir says, in my two rental properties that I've had went from £600 a month profit now. Since I have remortgaged, my profit is down to £350 for both properties. Properties. Wow. Just with remortgaging and interest-only mortgages, but you need to do that at this point in time. Interest-only mortgages is obviously going to alleviate your cash flow position, which is actually essential just now. Yeah, okay. Massive Ferguson says, I have said that all along rents also too little or too low in social housing for council houses to reinvest in new building. Exactly. I don't think they understand the concept of that, and rents will now go up every year. If it's 1%, I don't want to, but the government has driven me to it. Yeah. Exactly. This is we've got to be realistic here in the fact that this, in terms of Scotland, and I think England will end up following, because there seems to be this mentality that it works, and well, it doesn't work in Scotland. By the way, rent controls has never worked in Ireland, and they've repealed it, I think 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 times. So they've actually tried it and actually repealed it and says it doesn't work. And yet we've run down that road and done the same thing. And yet England is looking at Scotland thinking, oh, it must work then. It doesn't work. Trust me. Trust me, it doesn't work at all. The fallout is yet to come, but it is in the pipeline, I would say. So let's look at rental inflation, because we've talked about that a wee bit. And I think that was to go across the board. So according to ZOOPLA, the rental inflation slowed to 11.11 from 12.3 in mid 2022. The strong labour market and a record immigration drove demand in 2022. Private rented housing supply has grown just 1% since 2016. Private rented housing supply has only grown 1% since 2016. I think that's going to be negative next year.
Yeah, and I can tell you that the demand far outweighs that.
Higher mortgage rates have further weakened the economics of investing for landlords, impacting on new investment in rental stock. Landlords searching for yield to offset rising costs will push some to let into different sectors in the private rented market. Yeah, what does it mean by that then, Richard? What do you think? Landlords searching for a yield to offset rising costs will push some to let into different. That's probably people going into serviced accommodation.
Yeah, I've just got to say holiday shorter term lets and holiday lets and things.
Because there's no restriction on the pricing on holiday lets. There's also no restriction on the pricing coming on student lets as well now.
Yeah, so that'll push people into that to find accommodation that way, because, like you say, obviously, supply's grown 1% since 2016, and like you say, that could even hit negative in a year's time. Demand's still there, so where are they going to go? They're going to look at serviced accommodation and shorter term lets.
Yeah, and they've actually said it here. You touched on it about demand and supply and all the rest of it. They reckon the executive summary for ZOOPLA says, and growth and overall rental supply is set to remain limited in 2023. Demand is expected to remain above average, but lower than 2022. Rental inflation for new lets will slow to 4 to 5% by the end of the year, and the slowdown could be rapid in the inner London and other city centres.
That might be due to, that might be due to the fact that people are staying put, because obviously, a lot of people that usually maybe move on after so long.
Yeah, this is what I find quite interesting. When you look at this is the 5-year graph. Demand continues to outpace supply of homes to rent. So this is the rental demand versus 5-year average. This is the 5-year average for ZOOPLA. So 5-year average for ZOOPLA, the current rental demand right now is 51% more than the 5-year average.
That doesn't surprise me.
The stock of homes for rent versus the 5-year average, the stock of homes for rent is down by 33%. Now, most letting agents, according to ZOOPLA, have gone from 16 available properties for let to now 10 available properties for let in the year. So that tells you about the number of stock it's actually gone down. The flow of new supply versus the 5-year average, so the flow of rental stock versus the 5-year average has now gone down 9%. And the year-on-year rental growth, as I said, has gone up 11%, which is that the annual inflation for new lets. Now, remember, that's only new lets, as I said. That doesn't take into account existing lets because there's a freeze on them. So, how on earth is anybody going to be able to increase that if you're not allowed to increase your rents?
Yeah.
So I think they've got a ticking time bomb on their hands, definitely. I don't know what anybody else thinks out there. If you want to comment, please feel free. So let's look at the rental market, and it's running very hot. This is the next graph here. Now, I'll just zoom in on that a wee bit, see that make it a bit more clear. Now, this is the rental demand reaches new highs over 2022. The residential rental market has been running hot for 2 years, with something of a perpetual boom, in other words, a consistent boom over the years, and residential rents, which continue to run well ahead of earnings growth. Now, earnings growth has gone up, and that's fine, but would we not be accurate in saying, though, that the rental proportion of that was a lot less than what it was in the 1980s and 1990s in terms of your wages and your salaries? Because I remember most of my wages and the salaries in the 1980s and the 1990s was going on a mortgage, and it was literally about 56% at that point.
I don't personally remember, obviously, because I was born in the 80s, but looking at stats from back then compared to now, then you're right. Yeah, that was the trend. So it's different now.
We're going through a generational cycle now, and the new generation doesn't understand that that's what happened before. And therefore, people are throwing their arms up in the air and saying, what, my rent's 35 to 39% of my actual take-home pay? That's ridiculous. But that's tame compared to what it was in the 80s and 90s. So I think it's just a rediversion of resources, isn't it? So this will actually take money away from things like people eating out, and that industry will be hit as well, in terms of tourism. Right, let's talk about then. Okay, the average rents for new lets have increased by 11% in the last 12 months, while earnings had increased by 6.7%. Rental inflation has slowed slightly from 12.3 in the mid-2022, but there is no sign of any imminent slowdown. Rents have risen by 20% in 3 years. Well, property prices have increased by 30% in 3 years. So we're going to do something about rents increasing by 20%, but we're not going to do anything about property prices increasing by 20%. See the double standard there?
Yeah.
And I think because we can pick on and vilify a small section of our population called private landlords. And because we're so disseminated, it's easy to do that. That's why it's important to join your local landlord association.
Yeah.
Scottish Association of Landlords in
yeah.
Scotland. You've got the National Federation of Residential Landlords in England and Wales. You need to, in Ireland as well. You need to join these organisations to protect your interests. We need a union, and that is these people that will lobby on her behalf. They are currently going through, I'll talk about that in a minute. They're currently going through a legislative review, which is again, against the legislation changes for us, for private landlords. Anyway, let's talk about that. The rents in 20 years, an extra £2,220 a year, which is an ongoing concern for renters, especially those on lower incomes and in receipt of housing benefit. Well, let's cover that in receipt of housing benefit. Housing benefit has been frozen for the last 3 years. The calculation has been changed from the average, which is 50% of the average private rented market to get for a tenant, to 30% of the private rented market. So the government's deliberately lowered the universal credit, the housing benefit available for a tenant to get a home, and they've also deliberately frozen it for the last 3 years. So it's not because the private landlords are the issue here, it's because the government is not giving tenants on lower incomes enough money in order to rent a property. If property prices are going to have to go up by 30%, then the amount of money invested in these properties is actually going to have to be recouped in the finance costs against the 30% increase. And that's why rents have to go up as the natural byproduct of property is a lot dearer to buy to get the rent return. As much as I would love to have £74,000 given from the government for every single house built in Scotland, because that's what they're getting. They're getting £40,000 thereabouts for every single house that councils buy for resale from the resale market to rent in their social housing stock. As much as I'd love to get £40,000, I would be able to charge the same rents as a council then.
Yeah.
It's the cost of finance that's causing the problem here.
Yeah, also when you touch on the local housing allowances and things, Jim, I mean, last year in the 2022, when at the change of tenancies and new properties and things, when they were being priced accordingly to the market and things, obviously rents were going up, and people who were in receipt of the local housing allowance were priced right out of the market, and they weren't able to take the property on because they didn't have enough money to do that.
Yeah,
and that's because obviously they've frozen the local housing allowance.
So it is a lot to do. It is a lot to do with the local housing allowance being frozen and the fact that the government has not given people on lower incomes enough money in order to afford their rent. It's not the fact that we've been forced as private landlords to increase our rent, and it's only because things like the maintenance costs have gone up, the insurance costs have gone up, the finance costs have gone up as well. That's what's driving this market, not the fact that the landlord it's easy money for taking. It's supply and demand as well, but we have to recoup these costs based on where we are right now. So the report takes a detailed look beneath the headlines and what's driving the boom, the rental boom, and why we are not seeing a supply side response. The key questions are: one, this is what ZOOPLA is saying. When will we see rental growth slow? Oh, that's an interesting one. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Richard. And the second one, is there a risk the rapid rise in rents means landlords overshoot and need to recorrect in future? I wonder what that means. Is there a risk the rapid rise in rents means landlords overshoot and need to recorrect in future. Well, you know,
Yeah,
does that mean
that means
they go too much and then the market will...
Well, let's answer the first. Well, we'll look at the first one. So the first question you there says, the keys are, when will we see rental growth slow? Well, I mean, we kind of definitively see that, but obviously, I mean, like you say, through time things will change and it will start to slow. But I mean, I kind of definitively say, oh, I think by the end of the year or by summer, or do you know what I mean, or by next year. I think it's quite hard to pinpoint that.
It's quite interesting because where is everybody coming from? I don't understand this. If we've got a certain amount of people in this country and we're all here, and we've not been, you know, they're saying that we've not been taking immigration and all the rest of it. And people are dying and people are born.
Yeah.
Why? Where is all the extra housing needed? Why is this?
It's quite a strange one, and we've spoke about it before in the past, and we spoke about it on here in shows and things. But it just all of a sudden, it's like, where did all these people come from? Where are all these extra people that are needing housed? And to be, I can't definitively answer that, to be honest, because I've thought about it a few times. But there is a considerably increased demand from all these people, and there has been since the other side of lockdown. We've seen it.
Do you think the roadblock right now, you know, just like a roadblock, everybody running for the same thing at the same time, and then at some point in time it's just going to clear and you'll go...
I think, like you say, and then we've got that overspill because everybody's competing for the same, obviously, thing at one time, which is obviously housing that we've got not a lot of in the rental sector, and then obviously we've got that overspill, so we feel like we're totally overwhelmed with demand, which is kind of where we're still kind of at that point, but eventually it will obviously dissipate.
Well, because if you're not building enough houses and you're not building enough social and affordable houses, then, you know, it's kicking the can down the road and the situation will get worse.
Well, there needs to be something to alleviate that position, obviously, for it to then obviously dissipate, of course.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yes, David.
I was just going to say, Davey,
ask a couple of questions. Stuart Curry says, when will universal credit housing benefit allowance be unfrozen? I don't think they've got any intention on freezing it at all, ever.
I don't think there's any rush to do that in the imminent future. So
this has always been my argument. I've always been beating the drum with the political powers that be, and you know that. And I was talking to Douglas Ross yesterday. Well, I wasn't talking to him, I was emailing him back and forward, and Douglas Ross was discussing it, the head of the Scottish Conservatives. But at what point are we going to have enough properties for everybody to fill? And at what point is the government going to realise that the only way to decrease the housing benefit bill is actually to build their own social housing again? Because what happens is the money comes out the housing benefit budget and then it goes back to the landlord. So if they build their own houses, the money is basically going to come out of the budget for there and it's going to come back to them. And it's not going to go to a private landlord if that's really what they want to happen. So the reality, and it's going to be a lot less money because they're building their own houses, they're investing in infrastructure, and if they get the funding right and the financing right, it's going to make sense, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in order to decrease the housing benefit universal credit bill for housing, you're going to have to build more social housing, more council housing. Not necessarily, I would say, mid-market rent housing, which is through social landlords, because then you're just getting back to the case that the social landlord takes the place of the private landlord. And that's a different political argument there, however. But it's still the same rent level as what the private landlord's charging anyway. So therefore, you're back at square one by outlaying all that money. And then it's going to a so-called charity who are, you've got heads of, the chairman and the chief executive are taking an absolute fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably more than what the politicians get. I just don't get it, but they make a surplus. We've got to give them that. Oh, sorry, that's a profit, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a profit. But yeah, affordable social housing.
Aye, I used to have that all the time when they used to sit and say to me when we were sat in the housing partnership and we were discussing it. The head of the housing associations used to say, "Yes, but we need surplus." And what, a profit? You mean? No, it's a surplus.
Yeah.
Like, just let's define this. I used to bring them right back to it and say, let's define what you say a surplus is. That's your rents coming in minus your overheads and your costs. Isn't that right? And he said, yes. I went, well, that's a profit then in accountancy terms. So don't
course
kid
it is.
yourself and call it something else. And, you know, it's like, you know, oh, I didn't get it. I mean, if you put glitter on a turd, it's still a turd, isn't it?
It's a good way of putting it, I suppose. But, that second question, Jim, is there a risk that rapid rise in rents means landlords overshoot and need to re-correct in the future? Well, yes, and I think there's a few landlords and things that obviously maybe their expectation, and because they're in this mind frame, because they've got so much increased expenditure and things, they're wanting to obviously increase the rent, which is fine at certain points in between tenancies, but they maybe their expectations be a bit too much than what it should be, and you need to kind of increase the rent and in line with obviously the market and not too far, because you're just going to have to fix that in the future, and it's going to delay your whole process of letting and things if it's not priced correctly.
I think we'll increase our point where we'll get to the top end again, and then it'll be realigned over a year or 2 year later. I don't think that top end has been reached yet, and basically because of all the inflationary pressure that's going on right now, and then they'll have to see what's going to happen with all these increases that will come through, and all the new rents that will be set as a result of new people moving in. You know, I would say that the both governments, the UK, the English government, and the Scottish government, have a huge task to a huge mountain to climb. I don't think it's going to be solved by the way they're doing it right now. That's for definite. So we'll jump back to this graph. This graph actually is quite good. It shows rental demand reaches new highs over 2022. It shows rental demand per agent branch. So that's the black line. And then they've got rental demand per rental listing. See how that goes right up? See the rental listing goes boom. So rental demand per rental listing, that means that's how there's 15 people down the road lining up, or 50 people for every
one property. Yeah.
Because the rental demand per agent branch is in here. So it's a total disparity there. So this is what I'm going to talk about in here. So rental demand accelerates from mid-2021. Demand for rented homes and rental inflation took off as the economy reopened in the spring of 2021. And new visa rules attracted a major inflow of students and others for work right across the UK. The core measure of rental demand inquiries received per estate agency branch peaked in summer 2022 at a double the 5-year average. So double. It wasn't just 50%, it was actually 100%.
Yeah.
However, with a third fewer homes available for rent than normal, demand per available rental home spiked even higher last year by 250% above the 5-year average. Jeez.
To look at that figure, it's a lot, but it doesn't surprise me.
Demand for rented homes remains 10% higher than this time last year. Rents will continue to rise ahead of incomes, this is according to ZOOPLA, unless we see a sustained increase in rental supply of a material weakening in demand, both of which appears unlikely at this stage. So where does this leave us then? Well, high economic immigration boosts rental demand. That's really it. I'm sorry, but did we know? And while I was for not leaving, by the way, I'm just gonna castigate the government decision. It's like, so you've left in order to curb immigration, but high economic immigration boosts rental demand, so immigration is up. As a result. Okay, that doesn't make sense to what I was actually put on the table. Anyway, that's no for me to say. I think differently in terms of that. I think personally we need a really good immigration policy. We really need immigration to come in, because eventually our population will decline. We need enough people with skills in order to replace them, in order to work in the jobs which we're actually struggling to fill right now, which is 1.1 million jobs, and we've got about 900,000 to 1 million people actually chasing them. So we've not even got enough people to fill the current jobs we've got now, and that's not taking into account the existing jobs where will naturally people will retire from at an earlier age. But that's another story. Early 2021, the UK government conducted a major shake-up of the visa rules to attract skilled talent. Well, did they? There was one of the drivers of the record higher net immigration, totaling 500,000 people. the year to June 2022, and it was boosted by humanitarian schemes supported by Ukrainians fleeing the war and specific visas scheme for British overseas citizens. So there's another one that's put pressure on. So will that alleviate? I've got a funny feeling it won't, because that obviously happened, you know, when we had World War II and things like that. You know, Polish people came over here, and they're all still here anyway, and that's fine. But to think naively that this will all change back to what it was before is pretty naive. Rapid growth overseas from students. Do you want to cover that, Richard?
Yeah, and this is something that we've seen. I mean, a jump in student numbers also boosted migration. Overseas students studying in the UK totaled around 680,000 in 2021 and 2022, up from 122,000 in the 2 years. So thanks to the new visa rules and things like we covered there, this group are a lucrative market for obviously universities. We've seen this in St Andrews and things, that we get a lot of people coming across for the university in St Andrews. And part of the strategy to attract talent to the UK, and obviously skill, like we've said, all university towns have sizable amounts of purpose-built student accommodation. They are widely reported supply and demand imbalance as well, due to the growth of student numbers. And this means that student demand will spill over into the wider rental market, and we have definitely seen that over the last couple of years. Boosting rental demand in the summer months, which was particularly strong in 2022, as international borders continued to reopen and things, obviously on the back of restrictions being lifted and things. And this explains why rental inflation has remained strong across major UK cities and obviously like university towns and places that like we've got here, St Andrews. We've seen a big jump in that, and that's progressively just increased over time as the borders and things like for other countries did open. We got that influx, and there's the issue with HMOs and things in St Andrews just now. So there's a lot of students looking for the mainstream private residential properties as accommodation, and there's no room in the halls, and there's been a big issue with that.
Well, this is kind of essential, isn't it? And it's primarily essential because we can't go on about the fact that the NHS has obviously been neglected, and there's not enough skills in there. There's not enough doctors. We've not got enough dentists. We've not got enough of the professions which we actually need from these countries. So therefore, that's why we'll have to obviously have a strong immigration policy in order to bring that in. And you can't have. We're going to have no immigration because we don't want people in this country but we need people for the NHS and the dentists and the doctors. So it is that position where you have to have a balanced approach to that, definitely. So the supply of rented homes remains broadly static, though.
It does. And while demand has increased, the numbers of privately rented homes remains largely static. In 2021, there was 5.5 million private rented homes in the whole of Great Britain or UK, slightly more than the 5.4 total in 2016. This follows a doubling in the numbers of private rented homes between 2002 and 2015, driven by landlords using buy-to-let mortgages and things. So in simple terms, a static supply of rented housing means new investment that adds to supply is offset by the property leaving the sector. Right. So as a landlord disposes of rental homes as part of an ongoing portfolio rationalisation or exit the rental market altogether.
And we do see that, don't we?
We do, definitely we see that. And ZOOPLA said they're registering a slight slowdown in landlord sales in the face of a weaker sales market. So some 11% of homes listed for sale on ZOOPLA in the early months of this year, 2023, were formerly rented, and I could vouch for that. I'm very aware of what's on the market, and I know what ones have been in this area, and I know what ones have been rentals and things previously. And this is a reduction from over 13% last year, but levels remain above average. So tax changes, growing regulations, the higher borrowing costs and lending, which is leading many private landlords to review their portfolio, and the pros and cons of investing in housing, and it has put people off.
It's quite interesting. You were saying there, Richard, that there's a 10% reduction. You know, our the ZOOPLA numbers are saying 11% of the homes listed for sale in ZOOPLA in early 2023, which is just there now,
just
the
the last couple of months, yes.
they were formerly rented. Now, when you look at that number and you think to yourself, there's 2 million landlords in the UK or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And not every landlord has just one property. But even if every landlord has one property, that's 200,000 properties up for sale.
Yeah.
That's a reduction of 200,000 homes in the private rented sector.
Yeah. Now,
that's been taken into account, the one I talked about the 356,000 homes by the end of the year, which will be financially, not financially viable for a landlord to maintain. Therefore, they're going to get dumped on the market as well. So could we see that exacerbating itself to 500,000 properties, which is about a quarter of the existing, rental stock, and got rid of?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the good thing is that not a lot, but there's a lot of potential in these properties coming on the market that were previous rentals, and the investors and landlords that see this opportunity and pick these up and then put them back into the sector. But for the most part, they are picked up maybe first-time buyers, things, because the types of properties that are coming on are ideal for that. So we're losing them from the private rented sector. Some of them are coming back into circulation, but
and even last year, that was 13% last year, and it still remains above the average. And the tax changes as well, the regulations, the higher borrowing costs are leading many private landlords to renew their portfolios, and the pros and cons of investing actually in housing overall, haven't they?
Yeah, it's making people really reevaluate where they are and what they're doing, which is a shame because it's the legislation and the tax and all the other costs and expenditure that's forcing them to make these decisions.
Yeah, let's take a couple of comments here. You've got Marcy Ferguson. Aberdeen's perfect example how now low rents after oil depression. Even trying to sell a 2-bedroom flat is hard going, mainly because the mega building and was low interest. But then as well, you've got all these. Think about this. All these rents tumbled to about half of what they were in Aberdeen when it came to the oil crash. And that all rationalised. So all these rents have now. All these properties were bought at these rates in order, at that price, in order to get double the rent at the time. So they've halved, and now you've got nowhere to go in terms of the pricing. That's what's keeping that market artificially low in terms of the pricing. And then you're squeezed with interest rates going up and finance costs getting a lot higher. We could see a lot of casualties here. If you look at that, Dave Sleet actually says a good remark as well. With mental health such a low point, at what point will people in authority realise housing stability is the key underlying factor? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is the underlying factor for everything. Improving housing stability will save the system huge amounts above and beyond the benefits, the intangibles, really benefits overall. It's a great point, Dave. Actually, great remark. Do you want to cover David's?
Hi guys, I'll answer a couple of questions.
We'll cover that at the end.
Yeah, we'll go through that at the end.
Let's talk about the economics of the private landlord.
Yes.
So the economics of private landlord, the equity needed to buy rental homes, and with a mortgage has been increasing in recent years as the result of rising house prices. Okay, so lower rental yields and tighter lending criteria as given to that, and this has been exacerbated for the last 6 months with the rising mortgage costs. Just as I've explained there, literally my mortgage costs in the last 6 months have more than doubled. So they've gone up by 100%, but I'm only able to recoup 6% at the very most of my rent. Oh dear. But think about all the other landlords that are not in the position I'm in right now. They don't have that kind of luxury or that tolerance, I would say. I wouldn't say luxury, I would say the tolerance to possibly mitigate that and actually weather that storm when it comes. That'll be quite interesting. And if you're a landlord out there, you don't need to post anything for you personally on your page, but it'd be interesting to hear from you in a private post. If you message us direct, something like that, or send an email to info@fiveproperties.co.uk for Richard or myself, just so we know where you are and how you feel. Because we'd like to get a good feel for this, because most people know I lobby this all the time, and I tend to tag all the politicians in, and they do watch these shows and listen to them, or their team does, because I've had comments from them and feedback from them already about them, or their opposition parties I've had comments and feedback from. So let's look at this then. The buy-to-let mortgages are general interest only, which is a good taxation, good cash flow measure as well. Lenders require rental income generated by the property to be at least 125% of the mortgage. Interest payments for lower rate taxpayers as well. The increase to 145% for higher rate taxpayers, reflecting tax changes made in 2016, which was Section 24 of the Tax Act, or the Finance Act. Today, banks are stress testing affordability in new buy-to-let loans and stress testing a rate of 6% compared to 4.5% a year ago. Actually, I've just been stress tested at 9%. That's how high they're going now. So they're stress testing at 9%, and I'm glad to say I passed easily. But then I knew that anyway. I geared all this anyway, and I knew fine I could. And I stress test myself. We talk about that sensitivity analysis and risk analysis.
Risk analysis, yeah.
The chart shows here. So here we go. This is the next chart. This is quite an interesting one. So this chart shows here the amount of equity deposit needed to buy a typical rented home for a higher rate taxpayer, and a lower, and how higher mortgage rates have pushed this higher over the last year, which will be similar profile to lower rate taxpayers, albeit at slightly lower levels. So you can see that across there. You've got, in comparison, Q1 in 2022 versus Q1 in 2023, the deposit for new buy-to-let purchases at higher rates. So the deposit in Q1 last year for a London landlord was just over 130,000. The deposit now for a London landlord is 250,000. Yeah. See, in Scotland it's almost like for like, but then that's because of the depressed market, because of the moratoriums, because landlords are more than likely going for lower value properties with the full implications of knowing that there's no rent increases for this time to come on the horizon, and there's potentially no evictions as well. So they're very, very careful. Hence the reason the Scottish market for investment strategy only for landlords is they're buying at the right values, accommodate that thinking and that process. Whereas in the English market right now, there's no restrictions just now. So you can see right across the board there, Richard, where you go right across it in Wales and Northern Ireland, where the year on year, it's significantly more in terms of the deposit required to put down.
Yeah.
And it goes down. And then Scotland, as I said, even Stevens. So that's quite an interesting one. I mean, the London equity need has jumped £129,000 in terms of the value, 50% of the property value. And it's a sizable deposit to buy a property, delivering a gross yield of just 4%. 4%.
That's low.
Good grief. There's no much in there. The level of equity to buy remains lower in regional markets. By the way, gross yield should only be used if you're a cash buyer.
Cash buyer, yeah.
If you mortgage, it's the gross yield based on the mortgage out and how much money you've got in. So what I mean is how much money you've got in versus, that's the total money, and then versus the amount you've got after the finance cost is paid over the years. So for example, if you've got £6,000 rent, £3,000 finance costs, it's £3,000. If you've got 25% in on a £100,000 property, it's £3,000 divided by £25,000 instead of £6,000 divided by £100,000.
Yeah.
That's how you should measure it if you've got a mortgage, because that's the comparables. Okay, in most cases, higher rate taxpayers will need to take 60 to 70% loan to values. Changing economics of buy-to-let take into account with rising costs, more regulation, and uncertain outlook for property values is severely limiting the new level of investment by private landlords. I also think it's the draconian attitude for the governments and the noises they're making in the media right now. Some landlords are shifting portfolios into limited companies to find tax efficiencies, but this isn't an option for all landlords. I know that personally for some of the landlords that I know. They're just going up, and they're on variable rates. And variable rates right now for landlords are around about 8%, approach 9%. So those that continue to invest will be focusing on buying lower value homes at higher rental yields, as we said there, for Scotland and looking for segments of the rental market that will deliver higher revenues and strong cash flow potential to weather that storm.
Yes.
The new investment. Do you want to cover the new investment focused on?
Yeah, new investment focused on revenue and yield. So obviously, to help illustrate the choices facing landlords, we've got a chart here that Jim's going to pull up just now. And this shows the estimates on how the private rented market breaks down the sub-sectors nationally. So, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you can see that. Sorry?
I'm just saying you can see that there, yeah.
Yeah, that's clear enough there. So, 1 million homes are now available on the open market. So they are rented as part of a job or let under secure let tenancies. And then number 2, we estimate that 8% of the rented homes are operating in the holiday let or short-term let sector, where revenues are higher, but there are more running costs. Concentrated in cities and tourist hotspots, and Fife, obviously, we've got like East Neuk and St Andrews and things. These are the tourist holiday let hotspots. There is a risk that the availability of homes for rent in the long-term market will be squeezed if landlords shift into this sector for better returns. Now, that's strange that they say that, because I've seen a difference in that lately, and I've seen a lot of short-term holiday let landlords and owners coming to me and looking at the option for long-term residential, because they're obviously the cost involved in turnaround and things as well. So, I mean that's obviously what they're getting through their feedback.
But, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of turnaround and a lot of work involved in short-term.
And most landlords are getting to serviced accommodation. If you have to do it yourself, it just gets to the point where I've had enough of this. I'd rather just get a decent return. It's a steady flow, and that'll do it. And then there's the draconian attitude of legislation against this sector. Again, the Scottish government. It's like the Scottish government's just got it in for everybody. Towards licensing for holiday lets, all holiday lets. The council's taking a light touch approach. They're making it really easy for everybody to get a license. But once they've got everybody registered, I'm sure they'll clamp down on further legislation requirements. Because this is the whole point. This is why you get registered. This is getting you registered at this point in time, and then we start twisting the thumb screws once we've got you, because we've now got your details. It's like the taxman had no idea in the early 2000s how many second homes actually anybody owned. So basically, at the time when I questioned this, I said to them, "So do you know how many I own?" And they went, "No, really." And I said, "So if I sold all my houses and just put the money in the bank and never told you, would you know?" And they went, "No." What have I been taking capital gains for then? But genuinely, that's what they said, and that's why they put the system in place in order to the requirement for a second home for every single solicitor in Scotland to register that with the land registry, so they could track that, so they could build up a profile of how many people actually own the second home, so therefore they can close that loop of that potential loss in revenue later on. And so this is what they've been doing over all the years, and this is why they put all these things in place. Interesting to see there, not available for the open market, 16% of the stock is not available for the open market. HMO is 9%. Long-term let housing benefit, 18%. Long let market rents, 48%. And 8% is holiday lets and short-term holiday lets. So, HMOs and holiday lets don't seem to be the market you should be aiming for. It should really be long-term market rents and long-term housing benefit is the ones you need to support. Because you make a small loss and you have a small decline in that market. That's a huge impact. I mean, you have an 8% decline in if you lose 8% of the long-term market rents market, that's literally the same as the holiday lets market completely in its entirety. And it's the same with the long-term housing benefit market is 18%. If you lose 8% from that, that's literally the holiday lets market. So you're focusing on the holiday lets market, the HMO markets, which are minimal in comparison to these two markets, which you need to sustain and support and help in order to help these markets, in order to help the people in the properties.
Yeah, definitely.
So long-term market, 25% of renters in receipt housing benefit. renters rents are set by the government and the low end of the market, and they've been frozen since 2020. Yields all are similar. The yields are similar to the open market, assuming landlords buy lower value homes. This is the problem with the housing benefit market and the way it's been frozen. It's encouraging landlords to buy lower value homes, which potentially probably might be in more problematic areas, and possibly might not as be as energy efficient, and also might not as be as up to date inside in terms of kitchens and bathrooms and heating systems.
Generally they'll need quite a bit of upgrading, yeah.
So it's almost by the government's legislation, they're forcing landlords into the position, or they're bringing in landlords which can see the opportunity of not being as good as they should be. And they're forcing the landlords out. They would otherwise invest quite a lot of their money into this. They're forcing them out of the market by actually curtailing the return that they'll get, because there's no point in putting money into that market anymore, because you won't get the return required. I may as well just put it in the bank and sit on the beach and drink pina coladas for the rest of my day. Genuinely, this is how we used to look at an accountancy. You used to look at the capital employed in a company. Now, this is just a company in general. When you look at the capital employed in a company and you look at how much you made and then you reinvested, then you think about the profit you would make in the next year, and you measure the profit against the amount of money you made in the capital you've got employed now. If the return was lower than the return that you get in a bank significantly, there was no point in maintaining that business anymore. You may as well just shut the doors and put the money in the bank and save yourself the bother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the government doesn't understand. I fear, and you look at the backgrounds, and I have been looking at them recently, I fear there's too many academics in our government. There's not enough people with business acumen and what I call commercial reality of the situation and bigger picture thinking. It's all people from academic background who are career politicians that have come straight out of university, and they've maybe passed their university with flying colours, and they've been the top person in the debating society. And while they can debate the law and put measures in place, they don't understand the implications, because they don't have the commercial reality of the measures that they're putting in place and how that will affect the bigger picture overall.
Yeah, I think to have the experience of like boots on the ground, being involved in the actual day-to-day running of things like that, and have that experience. I mean, it's all very well being well educated, but it comes down to things like experience and common sense as well, which is a different thing.
Quite interesting. Stuart actually says the new income and EPC minimum requirements also worry me going forward, and he put some further info on this. I know it's 2028 and it's got to be C by then.
It's 2025 for new tenancies.
Yes, and
2028 for existing.
So I've got a funny feeling when 2025 comes, that can's going to be kicked down the road. England has just announced that they've moved theirs to 2028 now. They just announced right now. So the English government have actually said, we're going to move the EPC legislation because there's too much a burden on the existing landlords right now, and we fear that the landlords will exit the market as a result. And we don't want that to happen. So I've got a funny feeling, but you never know. You've got to remember, the key is you've got to be prepared for it. You've got to be prepared for it just in case. Don't run out and do it, for goodness sake. Just build a savings fund in order to do these.
Be prepared for that
nearer that time when it happens. But I just know the government so well because I've been doing it for 30 years. It's when you get there and you've done it, then they decide that we're just going to kick the can down the road, and we're going to move it 3 or 4 years down the road. Look at the classic example I had with the EICRs, and they actually asked me to change all the electricity fuse boxes to plastic.
RCD
but actually, no, RCD was fine, but they then said no, there's got to be a plastic box on it. Remember, and it's like, and I went and changed them all, and they were all plastic polycarbonate boxes, and then they changed their mind and went, no, we're going to change it back to metal. What?
It's the same with hardwired.
I've got every single one of them is polycarbonate now because you told me, and it's the same with the smoke detectors. Oh no, smoke detectors, they've got to be hardwired, every single one of them into the hardwire mains. I've got trunking all the way over my flats and some of them in order to accommodate for these smoke detectors. And then they turn around and says, no, we've changed their mind. That you could just have one hardwired, and as long as they're interlinked in 10-year lithium batteries.
You don't even need one hardwired now, as long as they're
Well,
all
there you go.
interlinked.
And
as long as they're all interlinked. Yeah.
I paid the best part of £40,000 to do all that, and then they changed their mind and says, no, you can get every property you can get for £200. So literally, my £40,000, as long as
they're interlinked with long life lithium batteries,
my £40,000 could have cost me 12 grand.
That's a lot of money.
That's why always wait till the government right to the wire, because they don't even bother. The other light touch approach, they take a light touch approach to everything. You get to the deadline and they say, right, have you done it? And everybody goes, no, I've not really done it. All right, we'll just get it done. And we'll just make sure you get it done now. And that's what they do. And so I've learned a lesson over the years, is just wait till they have a finalised policy in place before you actually do anything. Yeah. And no, it's not just a pie in the sky thinking like, this would be great to have this done by 2028 or 2025.
It's obviously it pays to be cautious, but I mean it's a shame because there will be a lot of landlords that are keen to make things the way they should be ahead of time and be obviously prepared like that. But then they'll obviously
Let's quickly go on to variations in available supply in the area. There's also different patterns of availability of rented homes by the type of area, whether it's a tourist hotspot or it's the City of London. Or it's the city itself, any city and village and all the rest of it. The chart here shows the numbers. This is actually quite interesting, the next one. So this is the chart of rental supply across different market segments. You can see there, look at the tourism one as the purple. So it goes, it comes right down. The tourism one was way down the pandemic. And then all of a sudden it's back up to some sort of equilibrium as to where it was before. London London's tanked, basically. Major cities, excluding London, has actually recovered back to where the tourists areas, excluding London, were. So London's kind of tanked, isn't it?
Yeah.
Availability of homes to rent for rent is worse in London. So it's the number available for rent. So we've got a decent amount, but London's the worst available for rent. And there's a huge competition from a range of renters, including students. And those working in London, short-term visitors. This will also apply to places like Edinburgh, I would imagine.
Yeah,
because Edinburgh's quite a high rented stock as well for the city. Yeah. We also we have shown, so ZOOPLA says we have shown that equity is needed by private landlords to invest in this market, which limits the flow of new supply to improve availability. The net result is that London tops the status, okay? Supply has improved in tourist areas which are out of season at present. This might also reflect more supply, which is the holiday shortlet moving into long-term market. Just as you said, the staycation boom slows, as the staycation boom is actually slowing. Definitely, available rental supply also improves in the major cities, the largest 11, excluding London. This is also seasonal line, reflecting the ebb and the flow of student demand each year in the summer. There's also a significant corporate investment in so-called build-to-rent schemes across many cities, except for Scotland, because they've basically stopped that because of the moratorium and the rent freezes. So they've managed to stop building programs, build-to-rent in Scotland and Glasgow in particular, because they announced about a month ago they've stopped because of this. So again, that's a lack of investment going in. So that's another thing as well. And the risks to rents of overshooting remains. So, or does it remain? So low supply exacerbates rental growth in local areas where rents for new lets have jumped the most. There's a risk that rents may overshoot sustainable levels. If rents get so high that many existing renters in the area simply can't afford them, demand will cool and supply will improve, and the rental level will need to. This is supply and demand, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the classic supply and demand. Yeah.
So they call it risk of overshooting, but it's actually realigning to where they should be.
Yeah.
The greatest risk is in London, where affordability is actually stretched overall. Let's finish off, Richard. What about rental growth varying for new lets versus all rented homes?
Yeah, I mean, there is a difference between the pace of which rents are rising for new lets. So when a property becomes vacant and the rent rises as reset to the market rate, which I was talking about earlier, obviously that's when properties become vacant or new properties to the market, we're pricing them accordingly to the market, and which rents are rising across the whole rental market. So whether people are moving or not, both matter to renters, and they impact the decision whether they move or they go to a new property, or how much their landlord might increase their rent after the initial term. I mean, that initial term, that's in reference to obviously not the PRT in Scotland, but so higher growth in new lets measured by ZOOPLA rental index leads the whole market growth rate. And you've got another chart there, Jim, for that we could look at. So there we can see that there. So ZOOPLA UK rent index. So new lets is the purple one. And you can see right up 11.1% as before.
That's 11% increase in the growth.
One was, and that's new lets. That's London.
9.4%.
And then UK rent index. So all homes. And then the lighter red one is UK London.
So this goes in line with what I said then. The new lets, or the existing lets is only increasing by about 4%, whereas the new lets are increasing in London 9% and 11% overall, excluding London. So it's really people in existing stock. It's really only, according to this, is only going up 4% year on year. So that for me says it all, really. Okay, so let's look at that again then. So the outlook will start to be affordability. We expect a continual scarcity of homes. And so we expect a continual scarcity of homes itself over the 2023, and the weaker economics for investors, ongoing competitors to build rental schemes, which will be any bright spots. That was what it is. Ongoing completions to build to rent will be one bright spot, adding supply to the middle end upper the market in the UK cities. One additional area of potential supply could come from sellers renting out homes so they can't sell due to weak sales market. But conditions aren't sufficiently challenging at this stage for this to impact on outlook. Rental demand is unlikely to be quite as strong as it was last year, given the weaker economic outgrowth, but we expect it to remain above the 5-year average, which much depends on trends in employment, especially across the UK cities where rented homes and jobs are concentrated. In terms of affordability,
I thought Jim's I thought his connection was quite bad there, but he'll jump back in. So in terms of affordability, average rents expressed as a percentage of earnings are now close to a 10-year high in all regions, except from London. So obviously the ZOOPLA index refers to London quite a lot as the main city, but as I say, it will be reflective of other areas like Edinburgh and Glasgow and things up here. But except for London, and this will start to impact the pace of rental growth. And that will continue over 2023, which we expect to slow down slightly, maybe about 4 or 5% by the year end. So we'll see how that pans out. But a faster slowdown in rents in inner cities and places like London and some other inner cities areas could be developed later in the year. And stretched affordability combines with localised increases in supply and slow job growth as well. So that is the outlook, and that how the affordability will be shaped. And he's back again. I finished that the outlook, Jim, with the affordability and things and how that will be shaped. I thought your connection was going a wee bit there. So we got to the end of that there.
Overall thoughts on the way forward? What do you think?
I think the outlook there just says obviously things will change as we go throughout this year and towards the end of this year. We've covered quite a lot of the stats, and I think they're quite accurate in the reflection of how we're seeing things in Fife. Although there is some slight differences. Interesting things about the holiday let. I am seeing a lot of holiday lets transferring across or looking to transfer across to long-term residential as well. But yes, I think the important things we've touched on here is obviously the issue with housing and the problems that landlords and investors are now facing due to the legislation and increased costs. Unfortunately, some people are going to get to a point where it might be too much for them. We have said obviously weather the storm as much as you can, because obviously this will we will come to a point where things will change again, but it is going to be difficult for a lot of landlords. And like you say, if you've not done the proper risk analysis and planned things out financially at the beginning of your investment, you might then obviously be caught out in this situation with cost and expenditure.
I think it's quite interesting. Matthew Ferguson says, just had a tenant tried to get a mortgage with a 70% deposit from him, but refused. Wow. I don't know if that's a bad credit rating. It possibly has implications on that. His mortgage would be less than the rent. Do you think the mortgage company should be taken to task? I was happy for his earnings, but mortgage companies not. You find potentially when you come back to that that it's possibly the tenant doesn't want to divulge the fact that they've got bad credit, and that's what's caused the problem. Most mortgage companies, we've had mortgage companies write to us in the past, haven't we, Richard, to say that is the tenant up to date with their rent, and do they pay it on time all the time? And they use that. Some mortgage companies actually use that as an example of will the tenant be reliable, because they don't have any further information available at hand to give them that confidence. So it's a great way to do it. So if you're a tenant out there, please make sure you pay your rent on time every time, because a mortgage company will write possibly to the landlord, if you've been living in a property, as to get evidence that you do pay your stuff on time. If they have a wee inkling, it might not be. He also goes in and said, "Is time landlords are allowed grants, not loans, to improve housing stock?" There is grants
available. I did see that comment, and there is grants going to be available.
I understand what you mean, especially with EPCs coming in 2025. You do get grants. The biggest problem with the EPCs coming in 2025, I do not think it will be 2025. By the way, I think it'll be kicked down the road. However, the biggest challenge there is when you've got a flat or a adjoining property, they've got to agree to it as well. And if they don't agree to cavity wall insulation, you can't get it. Because I'm sitting looking at some of mine, they're on 68, which is D, and 69 is C, okay, for the level. So in order to get it from 68 to 69, I have to put cavity wall insulation, but it's a flat. I cannot put cavity wall insulation in one flat if the other flats in the block don't agree, because they just can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's where the dispensation would kick in, and the fact that it's not possible to do. So you would be given a pass on that, by the way, under the current legislation, because it does say if it's impossible to do, or it's financially impossible, or it's prohibitive to do, then we'll just have to go with that. That's to allow as well for farmers who are rented potentially, not tied rent, not tied properties because you work there, but just rented in general to someone, a property, but you've got the old cottages, which will never come up to a sea level.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I don't know how you will ever get them up to that kind of level. I mean, some of them are sitting at like F and G, and
yeah. So, the solar panels as well is quite an interesting comment as well. Solar panels in tenants flat is capital improvement, not tax exempt. Why not? I agree, but this is where prohibition and the cost required to do it, to the value of the property and the return that you would get for the reduction in the tenant's bills, would justify the fact that potentially it isn't done. Even that's the only thing left that will get you from a D to a C. Though you could easily justify that there's no way you could do that because it's prohibitive in cost.
Yeah.
I'd definitely say that. And yeah, I know you did say this person that was trying to get that mortgage is a model tenant, but it doesn't mean to say that the very fact is they could have some bad credit or in their history, and you won't get to know that because that's obviously not your concern. And that's it really. Talk about grant companies. Can I ask? I've been approached by these grant companies on Facebook. I asked them about the grants. Davey, I'll give you a bit of advice. What they do is they get a list of your properties, they go around to all your properties, they have a look at what could be done, they give you a suggestion, they say, yes, that can be done. But for me personally, I've had it over all these years, and I think it's more hassle than it's worth.
Yeah.
Because it comes back to it comes down to saying that if the next door neighbours don't agree, then you're goose. You can't do it if you've got flats.
Yeah, Davy's also asked, just back the comments here, it's quite a big comment, but I'll read it. So he's obviously, to generalise this question, he's asked what we think about, obviously he's looking for his next buy to let, he's putting in offers for properties, he's happy to pay market value, but then looks at properties that maybe obviously they're needing X, Y, Z done. So then when he's putting in offers, then he's putting them in slightly less, and he's saying basically, I'm getting laughed at by estate agents and things, and obviously not being successful in purchasing his next buy to let. My advice there would be stick to your numbers, Davey, and if they work it the way they work, and then just stick to them. Something will come around. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating sometimes.
Okay,
but,
David, it's got a lot to do with possibly how you present it to the estate agent. I often go when I present my offer to an estate agent, I often put the preparation of the groundwork in first, in order to tell them this is why my number's at this figure. So in other words, I'm preparing it in advance. I'm saying, look, there's comparables, there's where the current values are at right now. There's and I do this. See, I do this in writing. I do it via an email, and I don't actually offer as such. I just say, look, I had a look at the property. I've looked at it online. My numbers work. Here's where my numbers work. This is the reason why my numbers work at this level. If the owner is interested in that, the good thing about me is it's a cash sale, it's a quick exit, and it's definitely going to go through. Potentially, I might sweeten the deal by saying I'll pay the legal fees up to £1,000 or something like that, as part and parcel of that. So then they start to it starts to make it nice and easy. So I make it as easy as possible for the seller to exit, rather than having somebody coming along and saying, well, I've got to go and get a mortgage in place, and I've got to do everything else. So sometimes they'll just say, yeah, I can't be bothered with the hassle. Now, you will get people like that, but few and far between. So it is the old saying of kissing a lot of frogs to find your prince.
Yeah.
So you can use that quite a lot, but you need to throw a lot of mud against the wall in order to get that to work for you. But you'll get the gems out there now and again, and then it fits into your numbers, and that's how it works. So that this isn't a race to get as much stock as possible. This is a marathon to build up a profitable investment portfolio that you can then be able to get a decent return out of for yourself, but also be able to put money back in to reinvest in the stock over the years. That's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be just running and saying, because a lot of people run and they buy 36 properties. I saw somebody, it was crowing at the fact that I bought 30 properties in the last 3 years. And it's like, okay. And I know why that is, because they think if they get the 30 properties and they service the debt, in 20 years' time, the value of that stock will be double. And that's where they'll make their money. But I've never actually focused on capital appreciation as the main driver for my investment decisions. It's always been about cash flow after all the overheads and mortgages have been paid, and then assessing the tolerance limits. If interest rates go up, where am I breaking even? If occupancy rate drops, where am I breaking even? If rental level drops, where am I breaking even on my numbers? That's when it gives me a degree of tolerance. So that's where I do all my criteria and all my analysis. And in 20 years' time, the value of the property goes up anyway. So why are you bothered?
Yeah, well, naturally increase over time.
You've got to work on every month.
Yeah, that's a good coverage of that, Jim, and a good approach to the way to buying and offering, and how to communicate with agents in regards to putting offers in. Just one last thing, David's also said here, and what do you think of letting agents not doing what they say, like doing their checks and not being able to get a hold of them? I know that a lot of agents will be experiencing the knock-on from lockdown and not being able to get any inspections and playing catch-up and things. Inspections are so important, and they should be done. In terms of getting hold of your letting agent, if you've got an agent that's in charge of looking after your portfolio and your investment, you should be able to get a hold of them. Speaking as an agent myself, I know that my landlords and things, anybody watching, I'll vouch the fact that you could phone me on a Sunday, a Saturday afternoon, an evening, and you'll always get me. So you should always, if you've got somebody dealing with your investments and your portfolio, they should be contactable, or have a point of contact for you.
Because most of the time when you're working all during the week, you're usually going to think about these things when you get home at night or at the weekend. And you don't want to be sending somebody an email and waiting for an answer like 3 days later. You would rather just have an open discussion with someone there and then. So as a letting agent to a degree, and as a sales agent as well, you kind of have to be quite flexible. And I don't understand the mentality of these people out there, are letting agents and sales agents and estate agents,
just switch off.
My private life is my own, and my work life is left at the door when I leave. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
you're obviously not successful at this.
Do you know what I've found in the last few years has been really good for communication as WhatsApp. WhatsApp's just brilliant for landlords and things. I'll message back and forward, and share voice messages and things with landlords in an evening. And I mean, that's the type of communication you need with your agent that's looking after your portfolio.
And that's us. Thanks for coming on. We've answered all the questions. We've done TikTok. We've done Instagram. Job done.
That was good. Thanks everybody for keeping it interactive, and we'll see you next time.
And then we've got our investment workshop tonight as well.
We do, yeah.
It's like, geez, I've just talked all day. Anyway, bye-bye for now, folks.